In this lecture, we are going to study about the rules which are under the title The Chemical Accidents Rule 1996. So it is the chemical accidents, emergency planning, preparedness and response rule 1996 under the legislation part of basics of industrial safety. The rule comes into exist with reference to the Environment Protection Act 1986 under the section 6, 8 and 25 in exercise of the power conferred with reference to EPA 1986. These rules are necessary, and that is why some of the rules are made for controlling the emergency, for controlling the preparedness plan, and for responding for the chemical accidents. So this is specially focusing on the chemical accidents only. So normally it is happen in the chemical industries as well as in the other industries where chemicals are going to handle, stored or used for a process. So where the chemical accidents are occur or whether the possibility of the chemical accident is there, for that industries this emergency planning, preparedness and response of chemical accident rule is necessary. So this rule is called as the Chemical Accident Rule 1996. The rule 1 is short title and commencement. So it is called as Chemical Accident Rule 1996. They shall come into force on the date of the publication of the official gazette. Then the second rule is definitions. So there are different definitions mentioned under this rule. Some of the definitions are chemical accidents. So the accident which happen while handling any type of hazardous chemical is called as chemical accidents. So there may be a chances of injury to the person, death of a person or damage to the property due to the accident. It is called as chemical accident. Then hazardous chemical. So we have already discussed about these hazardous chemicals in the MSIHC rule 1989. The same definition is here, that is for hazardous chemicals. So whatever the chemicals which are listed in the schedule 1 and 2 and 3 in the various columns, that are the hazardous chemicals. Then industrial activity includes an operation or process carried out in industrial installation referred to in schedule 4. So whatever the activities listed in the schedule 4 are called as industrial activity as far as this rule is concerned. Then on-site storage, on-site transport, which is associated with the operation or process as that case may be, or isolated storage or pipelines involved under these processes. So all these things are called as industrial activity, because sometimes we have to store that hazardous chemicals, sometimes we have to transport these hazardous chemicals. So for that purpose, these pipelines and pumping systems are involved, and sometimes we have to use this hazardous chemical in a process. So all the activities related to the hazardous chemicals are called as industrial activity. Then industrial pocket, it means an industrial zone earmarked by the Industrial Development Corporation. So that is under state government, or that earmarking may be done by the state government. If state government or that local authority, that is Industrial Development Corporation, if marked that point as industrial pocket, then it is called as industrial pocket. Then next is isolated storage. It means a storage of hazardous chemicals other than the storage associated with the installation on the same site. So if the storage facility is directly linked as a raw material, as a product, as an intermediate, etc., then it is not a isolated storage. Isolated storage means it is totally isolated from the regular storage tanks and regular activities which are involved under the process manufacturing. So if the Storage capacity, storage tanks are totally isolated, that is separated from the main site. Then it is called as isolated storage. You can refer the schedule 4 and 2 for the details. Then major chemical accidents. The accident which happen due to the or while handling the hazardous chemicals, and if it is a fatal accident, if the seriousness of the accidents is at high level, or if the damage to the property is at the severity level, then it is called as major chemical accident. Then MH installation is one of the definition. So that is major accident hazard installations. So it is isolated storage and industrial activity at a site, handling of hazardous chemicals equal to or in excess of threshold quantities specified in column 3 of schedule 2 and 3 respectively. If you are going to use the hazardous chemicals in excess quantity, which is already mentioned as a threshold quantity. Threshold quantity means the maximum permissible quantity, and all the quantities, their chemical naming, and in terms of tons, in terms of kg, in terms of other units, all these things are mentioned in the column 3 of schedule 2. If it is in excess of that threshold quantity, then it is called as MH installation. Then MSIHC rule 1989. So we have already discussed in detail in one of the session, that is manufacture, storage and import of hazardous chemical rule. So it is mainly dealt with the manufacturing process or storage process or importing of hazardous chemicals. So while handling, while importing, while storing, while manufacturing the hazardous chemicals, what precautions should be done, what are the provisions to be made while doing all these types of activity when we are going to handle the hazardous chemicals. So all the rules and regulations, their threshold quantities, their precautionary measures, their ultimate controlling authority, etc. All these things are given under the MSIHC rule 1989. So it is again the under Environment Protection Act. Then off-site emergency plan. So off-site emergency plan, on-site emergency plan are the parts of the MSIHC rule 1989. So on-site emergency plan rule number 13 and off-site emergency plan rule number 14. So what exactly required in the on-site and off-site emergency plan, that is mentioned under the rule number 13 and 14 of this MSIHC rule. Then pipeline, it means a pipe or system of pipes for the conveyance of the hazardous chemicals. So to transport the chemicals, that is hazardous chemicals, from one point to another point, we have to use the pipeline as a system through which we can transport these types of chemicals. So that is mentioned under the column 2 of part 11 of schedule 1 at a pressure of less than 8 bars absolute. So that is the main condition. You have to use these pipelines with the pressure less than 8 bars absolute. Then site is one of the definitions. So the location where we are using, handling, storing, etc. of hazardous chemicals is called as site. Then transport, it means the movement of hazardous chemicals by any means over land, water or air. So sometimes it is the requirement that we have to transport the chemicals from one point to another point, or within the plant itself, or from one plant to another plant, or from one city to another city. So for that purpose, we may use the transportation media as a land, that may be a water, that may be air. So that is the definition of transport. Then rule number 3 is focusing on the constitution of central crisis group. In case if the accident is happened and that accident is related to the hazardous chemical handling, then we have to phase we have to control that accident and their activities with the help of some groups. So that group may be a local group, that may be a district group, that may be a state crisis group, that may be a central crisis group. So depending on the severity of the accidents, depending on the different accidental history from the chemical industries or other industries where the chemical accident occurs, we have to select the chairman, the members, the expertise person to control all types of activities, and that is why these different groups are formed. So this constitution of central group is governed by the central government. In the same way, the state crisis group can be governed by the state government, the district crisis group can be governed by the district authorities, and local crisis group can be governed by the local authorities likewise. So the roles and responsibilities of each and every group, each and every member is different. So we have to control first that accident at the local site. So the main role is of local crisis group, and then simultaneously we have to control the similar type of accidents, or we have to avoid the similar type of accidents or recurrence of these accidents at the district level, at the state level, or at the national level, and that is why these types of groups are formed. So rule number 3 gives you the idea that constitution of the central crisis group. The central government shall constitute a central crisis group for management of chemical accidents and set up a crisis alarm systems or alert systems in accordance with the provisions of Rule 4 within 30 days from the date of commencement of these rules. The composition of central crisis group shall be specified in Schedule 5, and central crisis group shall meet at least once in a 6 months. So there should be at least 2 meetings in a year. That is the main criteria for the central crisis group, and these criteria may be differ for the state crisis, for the district crisis, and for the local crisis group. Notwithstanding any contained in sub rule 2, the central crisis group may co-opt any person whose assistant or advice is considered useful in performing any of its functions. So while doing all the activities, while guiding, directing to the state, district, local authorities, if some persons are going to advise some of the activities, some of the suggestions, that may be a modification in the rules and regulation, or there may be a rectification or improvement in the controlling guidelines. So whatever it may be, if the suggestions are valid, then that should be adopted by this central crisis group. Then rule number 4 is related to the constitution of crisis alert systems. The central government shall set up a functional control room at such place as it deems fit. Then that set up an information networking system with the state and district control rooms. So central group is going to contact with the state group, and state groups are going to contact with the district and local group. So for contacting these things, for getting the information, for collecting the information, and for providing the information also, for these two-way communication, we have to set up a control room, we have to set up a network wherefrom we can give and take the information related to the chemical accidents. Then we must appoint some adequate staff and experts to man the functional control room, published a list of MH installations. We already discussed about the MH installations. The installations where we are going to use the hazardous chemical quantity in excess of the threshold quantity. That is called as MH installations. So published a list of major chemical accidents in chronological order, published a list of members of the central, state, district crisis group, and then take measures to create awareness among the public. So we have to gather all this information at local level, at district level, at state level, and after gathering all this information, we must publish this data at the national, state, district and local level for the awareness of the public. That public must know what exactly or which type of hazardous chemicals are handled, stored or used in these industries, and what are the quantities which are involved for handling, storing or manufacturing process in these types of industries. So what exactly the adverse impact may be in case of accident, in case of fire, in case of explosion. So all these things should be known to each and every person, which may be the part of that company, which may be the part of that surrounding area around these companies. That is why it is should be published to the public. So that publications may be through the websites, that may be through the papers, newspapers, or through other media. Then rule number 5 is related to the functions of the central crisis group. So central crisis group shall be tile apex body to deal with the major chemical accidents. So it is the main controlling authority or the ultimate control group who are going to deal all the major chemical accidents. Then without prejudice to the functions specified under the sub rule 1, the central crisis group shall continuously monitor the post accident situation arising out of major chemical accidents and suggest measures for prevention and to check recurrence of such accidents. So the main functions of this central crisis group is to monitor the post accidents activities. Then they have to conduct post accident analysis, why this accident is happened, what are their adverse impact, and how to control these types of accidents in the near future. So all these things should be monitored, analyzed by the central crisis group. Then review district off-site emergency plans with a view to examine its adequacy in accordance with the manufacture, storage and import of hazardous chemical rules. Because in the MSIHC rule 1989, it is clearly mentioned that with reference to rule number 13 and 14, there should be on-site emergency plan, there should be off-site emergency plan. So whether these district authorities have checked or not, whether all these on-site and off-site emergency plan in a good condition or not, whether it is as per the guidelines or not. So if the accident is happened, it means there is some lacuna, there is some problem, maybe in the on-site or off-site emergency planning, or that may be in the precautionary measures while handling these types of hazardous chemicals. So whatever it may be, but that should be studied by the central crisis group. Then rule number 5, it is related to the functions of the central crisis group. Review the progress reports submitted by the state crisis group. So that central crisis group should review the progress regarding the reports which are submitted by the state crisis group, then respond to the queries addressed to it by the state crisis group and the district crisis groups. Published a state-wise list of experts and officials who are concerned with the handling of chemical accidents, render in the event of chemical accidents in a state all financial and infrastructure help as may be necessary. So whatever the reports which are made by the district crisis group and which is submitted to the state, and whatever the reports made and submitted by the state crisis group, that should be reviewed, and whatever the queries, doubts which may be involved in the reports of this state or district authority, that should be responded by the central crisis group. That are the main functions of this central crisis group. Then rule number 6 is related to the constitution of state crisis group. So in the similar guidelines of the central crisis group, this state government is going to form a state crisis group for managing the chemical accidents within the 30 days. Then the composition of this state crisis group shall be as specified in schedule 6. So all the members, their designation, number of members, all these things are given under the schedule 6. The meeting of this state crisis group should be at least once in a 3 months. So there is a different criteria for the central crisis group, that is once in a 6 months, and now it is for the state crisis group once in a 3 months. So once in a 6 months is the central crisis group criteria, and once in a 3 months is the state crisis group criteria. And in the similar guidelines, under this state crisis group chairman, the different members can be involved, especially to handle the chemical accidents. Then rule number 7 is related to the functions of the state crisis group. So obviously the state crisis group is going to support the central crisis group. The state crisis group is going to submit the details, all the information which is under the state government region, how many industries are involved, how many industries are there who are going to handle these types of hazardous chemicals, and with all the quantities, that is threshold quantities, then different emergency plans like on-site emergency plan, off-site emergency plan, their review, their examinations, when the examinations has carried out, all these things are submitted to the central crisis group by the state crisis group. So to assist the state government, to assist the central government, all these things should be done by the state crisis group. So these are the various functions of this state crisis group. Then rule number 7 is related to the function again, that is nothing but a monitoring of this accident situation, a review of the progress, and respond to the queries which may be raised in the district crisis group reports. So whatever the reports involved and prepared by the district crisis group, that should be reviewed by the state crisis group, and if they found there is some doubt, there is some query in these reports, then they have to respond to these types of queries. So the guidance should be provided by the state crisis group to the district, and guidance should be provided by the central crisis group to the state crisis group. That is the hierarchy of these different types of groups. So after accidents, the monitoring, reviewal, respond to the queries, and a general guidelines should be published for all the types of groups to avoid the repetition of these types of accidents. Then rule number 8 is related to the constitution of the district and local crisis groups. So we have already discussed about the central crisis group and state crisis group, and now it is district and local crisis group. So state government shall cause to be constituted within 30 days from the date of commencement, district and local. The composition of the district crisis group and crisis group shall be as specified in the schedule 7 and 8 respectively. So the district crisis groups, their members, their designations, etc. are given in the schedule 7, and for the local crisis group, all the detailed information is given under the schedule 8. Then district crisis group shall meet every 45 days. Now for the central crisis group, there is a condition that at least once meeting in 6 months. Now for the state crisis group, there is a meeting at least once in 3 months. Now it is for the district crisis group that at least once in every 45 days. And for the local crisis group, at least one meeting every month. So these are the different criteria for different crisis groups. Then the functions. So already we can understand that local authority or local crisis group should submit the detailed report regarding the accident, their detailed information about the companies, etc., to the district crisis group, and the detailed information under this district that should be submitted to the state, and again that state should be submitted to the central. In this way, this procedure is going on. So the first authority that is nothing but the local crisis group. So local crisis group should examine, should inspect whether all the rules and regulations which are given under this MSIX rule and under the chemical accident rule 1996, whether all the industrial persons are going to follow all these rules and regulations, especially when we are concerning about the onset emergency plan, offset emergency plan, then threshold quantities which are given under the different schedules, etc. All these things should be strictly inspected by the local authorities, and whatever the facts they found, that should be submitted to the district offset district crisis group, and whatever they found by the district authorities, that should be submitted to the state, and likewise state is going to submit to the central. Then continuously monitoring, then continuous information flow to the district, and forward a report of the chemical accident within 15 days to the state crisis group. That is the main condition, and it is also a function of the district crisis group. So whatever the information given by the local crisis group, that should be cross verified by this district crisis group, and all the information which is related to the chemical accident should be submitted to the state crisis group within 15 days. Then at least one mock drill should be conducted for a chemical accident at that site to avoid the repetition of the accidents, and all the strength and weaknesses should be reported to the state crisis group from these mock drills. Then the functions of the local crisis group is mentioned under this rule number 10. So we have already discussed about the planning of onset emergency plan, offset emergency plan, then mock drill, preparedness of the emergency situations, then mitigations of the chemical accidents, how to handle these types of chemical accidents, how to avoid these types of chemical accidents. All these things should be the functions of the local crisis group. Prepare a local emergency plan, ensure de-battling of the local emergency plan with the district of offset emergency plan, then train personnel involved in a chemical accident management. So all the persons who are directly or indirectly involved in the chemical handling or hazardous chemical handling process, in the storing process, in the other processes, that should be trained by the expert persons. And this training should be include the legal requirement. This should be include the classroom training as well as the mock drills, which are the practical procedures in the training itself. Then educate the populations likely to be affected in a chemical accident about the remedies and existing preparedness in the area. So in the factory premises as well as the nearby area, all the people should know what exactly the chemicals are going to handle in these industries, what may be the hazards due to these chemicals and their quantities, and in case of chemical accident, what to do. So all the solutions and preparedness about the chemical accident handling should be educated or aware to the people nearby the industries. Conduct at least one full-scale mock drill of a chemical accident at a site every 6 months. Forward a report to the district crisis group. So the local crisis group should conduct at least one mock drill, that is full mock drill, every 6 months, and the detailed report of this mock drill should be submitted to the district crisis group. Respond to all public inquiries on the subject. In case if the nearby people and all the public which involved in these mock drills, then they can raise the questions, they can object some of the points or the handling situations or the procedures, and the district crisis group must respond to the queries which can be raised by the public. Then rule number 11 is related to the powers of the members of the central, state and district crisis groups. The members of the central crisis, state crisis, district crisis groups shall be deemed to be persons empowered by the central government in this behalf under subsection 1 of section 10 of the Environment Protection Act 1986. So indirectly, whatever the persons or the members which are involved under the district, state or central crisis groups are representatives of the central government as per as the Environment Protection Act section 10 is concerned. Then rule number 12 is related to the aid and assistance for the functioning of the district and local crisis groups. So the MH installations in the industrial pockets in the district shall aid, assist and facilitate the functioning of the district crisis group. So we have to first identify what exactly these MH installations are. So we have discussed already what exactly the MH installation is, and if you find the MH installations in the industrial pockets, then we have to aid, assist and facilitate the functioning of the district crisis group for the MH installations specially. The MH installations in the industrial pocket shall also aid, assist and facilitate the functioning of the local crisis group. So the two-way communication, two-way support, that is from the MH installation to the district crisis, MH installation to the local crisis, and vice versa. And then only the chemical accident can be avoided. Then rule number 13 is related to the information to the public. So we have already discussed that all the information, that is chemical properties, then handling of these hazardous chemical in the plants, then quantity of these hazardous chemicals, what exactly the product is, what exactly the manufacturing process are, which type of storage tanks and in what quantity we have to store these chemicals, and then what are the on-site emergency plan, off-site emergency plan, how to prevent or how to tackle the chemical accident in case of accidents, how to mitigate these measures in the local, district, state or central level. So whatever the points which are directly or indirectly connected to these chemicals and their accident, all should be known to the public. The state crisis group should provide the information of chemical accidents to the state, and the local crisis group is going to aware the people about these industries. So all these things are connected, and we have to focus mainly on the MH installations. Now these are the different rules, that is 10 rules are involved in this chemical accident of 1996, and it is specifically for the chemical accidents and the hazardous chemical handling, storing or processing, right? So whatever we have discussed, the different schedules involved under these rules, we have mentioned that these rules should be known to that particular rule. So we must know what exactly the schedules are. So this is the first, schedule 1. Reference is rule 2B. Rule number 2, sub rule is 2B. That is why it is 2B and 2J. So part 1 includes in this schedule is toxic chemicals, right? So we know what exactly the toxic chemicals are. The chemicals which are having the toxicity property. So that may be a acute toxicity, that may be a chronic toxicity, etc. But if chemicals are having the toxicity property, then it is called as toxic chemicals. Now how to find out the degree of this toxicity? So there are different types of toxicities, that is the degree of toxicities are mentioned: extremely toxic, highly toxic, or moderately and low toxic. But as far as this chemical accident rule is concerned, there are two types, that is extremely and highly toxic. So if the oral toxicity value, that is LD50 value, is 1 to 50 mg per kg, then it is called as extremely toxic. If it is 51 to 500 mg per kg LD50 value, then it is called as highly toxic. So LD means lethal dose and 50 means 50% chances. Lethal means kill, fatal or death. It is the meaning that if we are going to consume 50 milligram per kg that much quantity of that chemical, so there are chances, that is 50% chances of death due to this dose, and it is called as LD50 value, extremely toxic, 1 to 50, and it is in terms of mg per kg. If the dermal toxicity is there, oral toxicity means ingestion, means directly you are going to digest that chemical. If it is the dermal toxicity, means it is related to the skin. In some of the cases, some toxic chemicals are having the characteristics in such a way that they are directly contacted to the hemoglobin or blood through the skin. Then it is called as dermal toxicity. Sometimes some chemicals are only irritate the skins. Then there may be some skin issues, skin problems due to these types of toxicity. So the toxicity which is related to the skin, that is called as dermal toxicity. So here dermal LD50 mg per kg value is there, that is 1 to 200 extremely toxic, 201 to 2000 highly toxic. In the same way, there is third entry of route, that is inhalation. So that is in the respiration tract. If the chemicals are going to add in the respiration tract with the help of respiration through the nose, then there is a 0.1 to 0.5 value, that is mg per liter extremely toxic chemicals, and 0.5 to 2 highly toxic. So these are the three different routes of entries, that is oral, dermal and inhalation, where from these toxic chemicals can be insert into the body of a person. So these are the different numbers which clearly indicate that these are the different LD50 values for the toxic chemicals. Then the another chemical classification is flammable chemicals. So flammable chemicals, we know that which can cause the fire. So there may be flammable gases, there may be a highly flammable liquids, there may be a flammable liquids. So on which parameters these flammable chemicals are classified? So the main parameter is flash point and boiling point. So if the flammable gases is one of the category or class, that is chemicals which in the gaseous state at normal pressure and mixed with air become flammable, and the boiling point of which at normal pressure is 20 degrees Celsius or below. Then it is called as flammable gases. Highly flammable liquids, so the chemicals which have a flash point lower than 23 degrees Celsius and a boiling point which normal pressure is above 20 degrees Celsius. So if the boiling point is more than 20 degrees Celsius and if the flash point is less than 23 degrees Celsius, then it is called as highly flammable liquids. Then flammable liquids, so if the chemicals having the flash point lower than 65 degrees Celsius and which remains liquid under pressure, then it is called as flammable liquids. So depending on the flash point, depending on the boiling point, these flammable chemicals are classified. Then there is another category of these chemicals, that is called as explosive. So chemicals which may explode under the effect of flame, heat or photochemical conditions, or which are more sensitive to the shocks or frictions than the dinitrobenzene, then it is called as explosives. So we know that the chemicals which are having the properties which can explode under a specific conditions. So the specific condition, there may be a ignition source, there may be a heat source, or there may be a photochemical reactions. So if the upper explosive limits are reached, then there are just chances of explosion. Then under the part 2 of this schedule, there are different chemicals which are listed. That is list of hazardous and toxic chemicals. So you can go through this slide that acetone, cyanohydride, acetyl chloride, etc. So if you observe the number clearly, I have skipped all the chemical list and I have shown you the first and last list of these chemicals. So here 431 chemicals, that is this 431 is zirconium and compounds. So 431 chemicals, that is hazardous and toxic chemicals, are listed under this part 2 of schedule 1. Then schedule 2 is related to the threshold quantities of the chemicals with reference to the rule number 2B, 2E and 2G. So if you observe the examples, that is acrylonitrile, so 350 threshold planning quantities, that is metric tons, 350 metric tons. Then ammonia, that may be a 60 metric tons threshold quantity, and likewise there are 27 chemicals listed in this schedule 2 with the threshold quantity. So threshold quantity means the maximum permissible quantity for handling or storing these types of chemicals. Then schedule 3 gives us the idea regarding the threshold quantity of some of the specific chemicals, that is the toxic substances. So some group 1 toxic substances are different, group 2 toxic substances are different, and likewise. Because the physical and chemical properties of all these substances are different one, and especially when we are talking about the toxic chemicals, we are talking about the chemical accidents, these threshold quantities are very much important. So under the group 1 toxic substances, there are 10 chemicals listed with threshold quantities and CAS number. CAS number is chemical abstract service number. That is one of the unique number where you can identify the characteristics of these types of chemicals. Then under group 2 category, there are 100 to 110 chemicals are shown. So likewise, you can understand under the group 1, there are 1 to 99 chemicals listed in this schedule 3, but I have shown only first 10. Then from 100 onwards, the group 2 toxic substances are listed here with the threshold quantities and CAS number. Now from this group 3 category, you can understand the group 2 is listed up to 124 chemicals. So under the group 3 category, highly reactive substances are there. That is from 125 onwards up to 150. Then group 4 is the explosive substance category. That is list of chemicals from 151 onwards with the threshold quantities and their CAS number. Then part 2 of this schedule 3 is for the classes of chemicals not specifically named in part 1. So whatever the chemicals which are not listed in part 1 should be listed in the part 2 of the schedule 3. That is called as group 5 chemicals, flammable chemicals. So here we already mentioned about these flammable gases, highly flammable liquids and flammable liquids. So these categories are listed with the threshold quantities as 50 tons, 1000 tons and 25 tons, right? So depending on the type of chemicals, the CAS number is there. Then schedule 4 is related to the installation for the production, processing or treatment of organic and inorganic chemicals using for this purpose among others. So with reference to the rule number 2C and 2E, these are the different production or processing treatment of the organic and inorganic chemicals like alkylations, amination, carbonylation, condensation, dehydrogenation, esterification, halogenation, hydrogenation, hydrolysis, oxidation, polymerization, sulfonation, desulfurization, etc. So there are various types of processing or unit processes which are involved for treating these organic and inorganic chemicals. Then schedule 5, it is related to the composition of the central crisis group. So we have already discussed about these functions of the central crisis group. Now this schedule 5 gives us the idea, the composition or constitution of this central crisis group, means who is going to participate in the central crisis group and what is the designation. So the secretary, Government of India, Ministry of Environment and Forest, is the chairperson of this central crisis group. Then joint secretary or advisor, Environment and Forest, is the member secretary. Joint secretary, labor, is the member of this central crisis group. And likewise, other members are joint secretary advisor, chemical and pharmaceuticals, director general, civil defense, fire advisor, director general, civil defense, chief controller of explosive, chief controller of explosive, joint secretary, Department of Industries, director general, Indian Council of Medical Research, joint secretary, health, chairman, CPCB, then director general, Indian Council of Agriculture Research, director general, Council of Scientific and Industrial Research, 4 experts, industrial safety and health, joint secretary, fertilizers, director general, telecom, 2 representatives of industries to be nominated by the central government, joint secretary, surface transport, general manager, rail safety, advisor, central for environment and explosive safety, 1 representative of the Indian Chemical Manufacturer Association to be nominated by the central government. So these are the different members, chairmen and member secretary of the central crisis group. So near about 21 members are there, including chairperson and member secretary. So you can understand, you can observe the experts from various fields are involved to handle these types of chemical accidents. Then schedule 6 is related to the composition of the state crisis group with reference to the rule number 6(2). There are different members, like chief secretary is the chairperson, secretary labor is the member secretary, secretary environment is the members, secretary health, secretary industries, secretary public health engineering, chairman state pollution control board, 4 experts from the industrial safety health to be nominated by the state government, secretary or commissioner transport, director industrial safety, chief inspector of factory, fire chief, commissioner of police, 1 representative from the industry to be nominated by the state government. So there are 13 members, including chairperson and member secretary, is the body or the constitution of the state crisis group. So we have already discussed about the functions of the state crisis group. Then schedule 7 is related to the composition or constitution of the district crisis group. So for this district crisis group, district collector is the chairperson, inspector of factories is the member secretary, district emergency energy officers, member, chief fire officer, district information officer, controller of explosive, chief defense, civil defense, 1 representative from trade unions, then deputy superintendent of police, district health officer, commissioner municipal corporation, representatives of the Department of Public Health Engineering, representatives of the Pollution Control Board, district agricultural officer, 4 experts industrial safety and health, then commissioner transport, 1 representative of industry to be nominated by the district collector, chairperson or member secretary of local crisis groups. So there are 18 members, including the chairperson and member secretary, are the members of this district crisis group. Then for the local crisis group, schedule 8 gives us the idea. Subdivisional magistrate or district emergency authority, chairperson, inspector of factories, member secretary, industries in the district, industrial area or industrial pocket, members, transport of hazardous chemicals, 2 numbers, fire officer, station house officer, block development officer, 1 representative of the civil defense, then one representative of the civil defense, then primary health officer, editor of local newspaper, community leader, one representative from the non-government organization to be nominated by the chairperson, two doctors eminent in the local area to be nominated by the chairperson, two social workers to be nominated by the chairperson. So near about 14 members, including the chairperson and members, are the members of this local crisis group. Thank you. So these are the different local crisis group, district crisis group, state crisis group, and central crisis groups. So all these groups members details are given under these schedules, and the functions of these different groups are given under the rules. So all these things are related to the Chemical Accident Rule 1996. Thank you.